I call it the Monday morning head nod. So this is what happens. A leadership team, they all get together on Monday morning. They spend about 2 hours. They hear about all the challenges that are coming up. They all say, yup, yup, yup. They all shake their head. Then they all leave and do their own thing. And that's because everybody that's there is really focused on their silo.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Reanimated Stories. This is Roger Jorns, and the owner of Reanimation Design and host of Reanimated Stories. And today, I am extremely excited to have Amy with us. And Amy is someone that I've met through networking, Success Champions Networking, and we have had a great couple of chats. And the last time that we talked, she was sharing some things with me as she has been growing her leadership coaching, as she has been growing that, and she has been sharing some things. And I said, I need to have you on my podcast because I want you to share what you're doing. I think my audience will enjoy that. So here she is in the flesh. Okay, she's not really. Amy, I tend to say that like every time I have a guest on here, it's all virtual, right? But every time I'm like, hey, thanks for coming out. No one's ever come out. I mean, I'm in here in my office, you're in your office and all that. And I say that every single time. So Amy, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here. Thanks so much. Happy New Year,
Yeah.
Roger.
Yeah. Happy New Year. Yeah. We are here right at the beginning of 2026. So it's really exciting. Well, Amy, without further ado, would you go ahead and share what is it that you do? And would you share that with the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a leadership and leadership team coach. So that means I coach leadership teams. And the reason that's so important is because leadership teams are the most important team in a company, and they're the least likely to act like a team. And so that's what I do. I focus on making sure that they can collaborate better.
That's really funny that you just said that. I'm a leadership coach, and the thing is that teams, they tend to not act like a team. Can you go a little bit more into that? When you say that they tend to not act like a team, is that where you're going to come in and you're going to try to figure out, okay, how are we going to get them to collaborate and talk me through that a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. I call it the Monday morning head nod. So this is what happens. A leadership team, they all get together on Monday morning. They spend about 2 hours. They hear about all the challenges that are coming up. They all say, yup, yup, yup. They all shake their head. Then they all leave and do their own thing. And that's because everybody that's there is really focused on their silo. So even though there's somebody from usually marketing and someone from ops and someone from finance, everybody comes in, they hear what the problem is, but instead of solving it together, they all go on their own and try to solve it individually. And so what I do is I have a scientific method to actually pinpoint exactly where the problem is and help them see that and then fix it.
It's so funny. As I've been talking with people, it's so interesting to see that mentioned more and more is that here we are, you have your marketing, you have sales, you have, the VP of this, whoever is there. And I love that you just said that the Monday morning nod, everybody's like, yep, yep. And then you just kind of you go off and you do your own thing. You come back. I mean, that's like the classic definition of insanity. It's, oh yeah, definitely, we'll do it. And then it's like, you're kind of coming back and you're doing the same thing over and over. And eventually someone's going to be like, why is this not working? You had mentioned that you have a scientific method to pinpoint that. Can you go into that? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I have an assessment that can actually tell you where your skills are from leadership perspective. And the cool thing is we can do it for individuals, but then we can do it as a team. So we can actually look at it and say, do you work better together or separately? And that's what's so cool about it, right? So you might be great. You might be super innovative and creative. And then you put the whole team together and then you find out that no one listens to each other, right? So typically a team has all superstars, but the question is, do they actually act like a superstar team?
That's extremely important. I love that. You're saying here, okay, we all have all these it's like having like 5 Michael Jordans on the team and nobody, nobody's doing, no, that's, so Amy, really quick, let's kind of backtrack, not really, but so you obviously, you see this problem and it's not just something you're just like, hey, this is a good idea. Maybe I should look into doing this. Cause you've obviously have experienced this. Tell us a little bit about your background, if you don't mind, and what kind of led you to really, one, developing the system and then recognizing that problem. And so then going back, developing that system to help solve that problem.
Right, right. Yeah, I live this. I've been on a ton of leadership teams. I've never seen a leadership team that doesn't work like this. And it was only lately that it was like a big aha. It's like because they don't actually think of themselves as a team. Everybody gets together and we all represent their area. So I was a marketing executive for 20 years and I would come in focused on marketing because that was my key part. And then when the problem came up, they'd be like, Amy, marketing, how are you going to solve this? So and so, ops, how are you going to go solve that? And I was like, yeah, I'll get on it. So I go back to my team, and that's what everybody did. And it dawned on me, we're not acting like a team. And so that was the key part. So once I left corporate, I'm a corporate escapee, and I decided to take up coaching. I said, this has got to be my focus because I lived it, I understand it, and now I know how to solve for it.
Sorry, I'm going to go back again to the basketball analogy. So
Okay.
for all of my,
Oh, yeah.
listeners who are like, why does he talk about basketball? But it's an easy thing to think of. If every position on the team, right? If the point guard was like, and they don't really do this anymore, and and it's positionless, but anyway, that's a whole other discussion, right? But if you think like traditional basketball, you have the point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center. And the center, right? He's traditionally been the big man. And what was interesting is that, back in the day with Wilt Chamberlain and all them, well, they had to devise, or they had to come up with a rule eventually that says you can't stand in the key underneath the basket
Yeah.
for more than I think it's 3 to 5 seconds. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you can't do that. Right. And it kind of reminds me, it's like, well, what if the shooting guard was like, all right, well, I'm going to stand here at the top of the key and I'm going to pass the ball, but I'm not going to do anything else. Like this is my spot. And the shooting guards, well, I'm going to stand over here. If everybody was like, I'm going to just stand here, I'm just going to pass the ball. And that's how you learn how to play basketball, right? It's like, okay, well, everybody's going to stand somewhere. We're just going to pass the ball back and forth to kind of but like, if you stop there, no one's ever going to shoot the ball, right? Because the defenders are going to be running back and forth and they're going to, they're going to get the ball. And I think that that's really important. Like how you were saying, well, I'm marketing, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to try to solve this from a marketing perspective. And then sales is like, well, I'm going to try to take this from a sales perspective.
Exactly.
So in that, I'm sure were you seeing a lot of like, well, we have the solution, but no, we have the solution. But at the end of the day, nobody really had a solution. Would that be kind of like a fair assessment?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, everyone has a partial solution. Everyone solves it from their perspective, but never the whole team together. Because you brought up basketball, can I take you back and talk a little bit about basketball?
Yeah.
Because I think this is a really great example. So, like, you remember the 1980s when they had the NBA All-Star team against the Olympic hopefuls
Yes.
when we didn't go to the Olympics, right? And they played. Do you know what? I don't know if you remember what happened, right? The Olympic hopefuls won 4 out of 5 times.
Yes.
And the only game they lost, they only lost by 2 points.
Yeah.
Right. And why is that? Because they had a whole team of superstars versus these college kids that actually were passing and were playing as a team.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the key point. That's how you have to think about leadership teams. And do you know what they found? Because there's a parallel between basketball and business. Do you know how they found out like which teams would work better together on the basketball court?
No.
The ones that passed more.
Oh,
so you usually think it's the one that shoots more.
Yeah.
But the one that pass more because they're passing to the right person who's in the right spot to take the shot versus superstars that are just taking shots because they're a superstar.
Yeah.
And so that same analogy applies to business. It's when you pass the ball, when you collaborate is who does better as a team. Because you don't want the leader of the team making all the decisions and taking all the shots. You want the team that has all the relationships to actually work together. Yeah. So I think basketball is actually a really great analogy.
No, I think that totally makes sense. So 2 of my favorite players, Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. Well, what's interesting about them is that, obviously we think of Michael Jordan and, the debate on whether he's the GOAT. Spoiler, he is. Exactly. And so when they became really, really good and when they flourished, especially Kobe Bryant, it was when they actually had more assists than when when their assists were higher and their points were, obviously they're going to score 20, 30 points because that's just who they are. Right. But when they were getting those double digits of assists, and I think that's, So just like what you were saying, like when we're thinking, okay, how can we support other people? How can I not just stay in my silo, but how can I kind of, bleed over? How can I kind of figure out? I think that's really cool. You had mentioned, so now kind of coming back to the business, and now that I've taken us off on a tangent of
Yeah.
basketball and now we're back.
Okay,
So
no
with
problem.
your
Yeah.
with the system that you devised, kind of talk me through that. Talk me through a little bit about like what you're doing within that system, and then also kind of some
Sure.
out of the box ideas.
Yeah, sure. Well, if the first part is starting with the assessment because you have to figure out where the challenge is and where the problem is. A lot of times we get asked, my team is not innovative enough. Help us be more innovative. That's usually the problem statement. So we go in and we look at the skills for all of the individual team members. And then we, as I said, we do it for the whole team. And we say, actually, you're quite innovative. You're quite creative. You're just like dropping all the great ideas on the cutting room floor, as they say, right? And so the first thing is to just do the assessment to find out where are the challenges? What are the skills that the team is challenged with, right? Because you can't just change the Monday morning meeting without knowing like what's the skill set. So first do the assessment, do it as a team, and then all agree on what problem you want to solve first. So maybe it is the Monday morning meeting. Like make that more efficient, make it better, make it a problem solving meeting, not just like a status meeting, which you can like send around email, right?
Yeah.
You have the most important people in that meeting. And, if you go to a lot of them, they're on their email, they're texting, they're,
That's
waiting for
paid
the marketing person
attention.
to go
Yeah.
and then this other person, right? You can actually go in and see that. But so the first thing is find the problem that you want to solve. And then as a team, we solve it all together. So it's not like, oh, it looks like there's a marketing problem. Let's go, we'll go work with marketing. No, that's like the whole opposite of what you want to do. So it's get agreement on the problem to solve and focus on that. Get some quick wins, right? Do that, quick as a team. They see the trust, they see that that we're adding value, and then work on the next thing and keep going. And so that's how you kind of break it down. You got to get the quick wins, get the trust of the team, and then move forward.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I can see. All right. Well, everybody, what's the problem we need to solve? And you have 10 people in the room and you get 25 responses. Yeah, no,
Exactly.
and it's always, I'm sure, the other person or the other side of the tables,
Exactly.
we need to fix them, right? And not us. We're
Right.
doing fine. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that totally makes sense. So once you've kind of established, and like you said, okay, you got this quick win, we're starting to, what are some of the things that you start to think through of like, okay, so we've all agreed that, right? We've all agreed that it's marketing's fault. No, we all agree that we need to,
Yeah. Hey, wait a minute,
yeah,
I'm used to that.
yeah,
No.
yeah. So you've
Yeah.
all agreed, okay, our Monday morning meetings, they need to change. So just as an example, right?
Right.
So now
Yeah.
what's the process of, okay, what are some of the things, how are we going to start to solve that problem in order
Yeah.
to solidify that and then move on to the next
Yeah.
thing?
So there's a couple ways. So I mean, the first answer is well, it depends, right? Depends on what the problem
Yeah.
is. But there's two approaches that I take. The first one is arts-based learning.
Mm,
So I'm a certified innovation coach based on arts-based learning, which is using the arts to actually apply to the business challenge. So I'm not going to make anyone a painter or a musician or anything like that, but using art actually changes your brain
yeah.
and it makes people remember things better. There's something called the forgetting curve. Most people forget what they learn within 24 hours,
Oh, wow.
but art actually makes it stickier. So you do an art exercise that's carefully designed based on the challenge that we're focused on, right? You debrief it and then you apply it to what the challenge is that they're all working on. So you kind of are focused around the art, you see how that applies, then you apply it. And that's where people start having really great ideas. And that's one way you can go solve it. That's team based, right? That's the key part.
That's
And
cool.
then the other thing I do is I'm a coach. So if we find that, one person is challenged in a particular skill area, I can help them work on that as well. So we do individual skills as well as team-based skill improvement.
Cool. So you're okay. That's really cool. So you're doing the team, and then it's like, okay, well, now let's look at you individually. I want to come back to that in just a second, but before I forget, that's really cool. That you said art based
Yeah.
learning, correct?
Right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because that sounds really cool. I think that is such a neat concept because I don't think a lot of people think about that. And I love how you
Right.
said, well, I'm not going to make you an artist, right? But talk a little bit more about that
Yeah,
because I think that
exactly.
that's super cool.
Yeah. Well, most people say, if you ask anybody, are you creative? Most people say, no, I'm not creative, right? I don't have a creative bone in my body. I started there that way too. And about 10 years ago, I took a drawing class because I had heard, oh, in the day of AI, like the most important skill is going to be creativity. And here we
Mm,
are. And that's
yeah.
actually really true. And I took an art class because I'm like, I'm not creative. And then I was like, wow, I actually can do this. And everybody can do it. No, everybody thinks, or most people think they can't,
Yeah.
especially if they're left brained, but they can. And so it's just a skill that you can use and get better. So one of the first activities I do is one that shows them that that's a limiting belief,
Mm,
that you're not creative.
mm.
And there's a certain way we do this drawing exercise. It takes 5 minutes. And every time the group always says, wait a minute, that's better than I thought. Hey, that's actually pretty good. And they're all like, wow, we all thought we weren't creative. And so that's an example using, arts based, show them that limiting belief. And then it's like, well, what else is your limiting belief? What's your limiting belief about your competitors, about you, right? Then they start applying that. So that's the key.
That's cool. Yeah, that is absolutely astounding to kind of think that like, oh wow, you have these like board members or you have these like executives, you have these team members, and it's like, well, I'm gonna show you how to draw. I mean, you're not gonna become an artist, right? But I think that
Right,
is so
right.
cool. You have an exercise. I think that sometimes we forget how much art in different forms, whether it's drawing, whether it's writing, any of those things. I think sometimes we forget how powerful those things are. It's funny, my wife and I were just watching. I've already seen it, but she had never seen it. We were watching Stranger Things, and in season 4, there's this big, there's this big thing with Kate Bush is running up this hill, and they talk about how it's a quick little side, which then is a plot point later on, where they're like music affects a brain in a certain way that other
Yeah, yeah.
things don't. And just alongside with what you're doing, I don't think I can even start to think of when in a business setting we would need to draw, in a corporate setting of like, oh, well, we're in fintech or we're a startup or we're doing, this, but it's like now you're coming in and you're showing them, hey, we're going to learn how to be creative, whether that's drawing, that's writing, whether that's, and seeing that,
All right.
I think that that is really cool. And so, yeah, no, I thought that was
Yeah.
really cool.
Can I give you a couple fun facts? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
they actually studied Nobel laureates, and they said what
Okay.
what differentiates them from like accomplished scientists, and more of them had arts-based background, like they played music, or they
Yeah.
were painters, or they were writers, and you can go through like so many of them and see that was a real differentiator for them.
That that's so cool. And then on the flip side of that, I've been in music and I've seen, and I've had friends and all that. And it's so interesting because, it's like some of those like really great musicians are really
Yeah,
also good at math. And in a way, they almost see
exactly.
that, like whether it's playing the piano or something
Yeah,
like that, right? It's they're seeing it in like in a mathematical equation. And so that is so cool. I'm sure that
yeah.
is such an eye-opening experience for those that you're working with. So
Yeah.
that's really cool.
Yeah. I think it was Albert Einstein that actually was a violinist. I think
Oh,
he
really?
played like 4 hours every day.
Oh,
And he used to
wow.
see things in music, which is
Yeah.
what he said. So,
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, so
yeah.
there's a correlation there. But the work that I do is based on work that was done with the National Science Foundation. There was a 10-year study that was done that showed how art changes the brain
Yeah.
and how it does make you more innovative and more creative. And that's what my assessment is based on.
Yeah.
So there's actual real, not just causation and causation,
Yeah, yeah.
actually.
No, that's so cool. So so then once you've done that, what's kind of maybe the next step from there? So you've made the assessment, you guys have now kind of done some creative stuff. What is it that you do from there? Or, is there a next step?
Yeah, well, it's a combination of continuing to do that,
Okay.
getting the group together, and then individual coaching.
Okay.
Sometimes we bring them to bigger like art exhibits and we focus on different aspects of it. So we do different angles of it. We show how music plays a big part of it. So there's an orchestra called Orpheus. Actually, it's the only conductorless orchestra in the world. So
Yeah, I think I heard.
everybody takes a leadership position, and they win Grammys, and they play Carnegie Hall, and there's no quote leader.
Yeah.
Everybody takes a leadership position. It's rotating leadership. So we use examples like that to actually bring it to life. And then at the end, we obviously we're aimed at whatever their objectives are. So we can measure those objectives, and we can also retake the assessment and see how much they've improved. So
Oh
we do
yeah.
before and after testing.
That's really cool. Yeah, no, I think that's extremely important to have. And I like how you said that, we're going to look at it again and then we're going to see where they're at. If someone was listening and they were thinking like, "Oh, well, that sounds kind of interesting." I mean, aside from the creative stuff, right? Like, but
Right.
we have some leadership issues both individually and also together. And I think that's, again, going back to the basketball
Yeah. Yeah.
analogy and also even the music analogy, right? It's, well, we're going to work on this as a team, but then I also individually need to improve. So if someone was
Yeah.
thinking like, "Hey, that sounds kind of interesting. What are some questions and what are some things that they need to think about, or kind of what do they need to do to kind of survey the landscape and themselves to say, maybe that's something that we need to do?" And what would they, and so what are some things that they need to think about?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, first of all, obviously, I'd love to talk to them. And the thing that I like to do is just give them the assessment. So if they have a leader, or they themselves or a leader, I always ask them, give me one person on the team and no charge, and I will do the leadership assessment for them. I mean, on them.
Yeah.
And then they can actually see the value of it, because once they see the value, typically they say, can you do this for everyone on my team? So that's my open offer, actually, is because I think you have to see it to understand it, because a lot of assessments tell you, what your destiny is, or, what you're really good at. This
Oh,
is a skills assessment. This is telling you what your skill is today, and you can always get better at it.
hmm,
And so it's the other interesting thing is it's an activity test. So you actually work on real world problems, and you do it multiple times, and then we can actually look at your patterns. So
that's
again, the
cool.
first thing is I'd love to work with you and show you how it works on one person on your team. And then we can talk from there.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, no, that's cool. The patterns and all that, that makes sense. I mean, if someone's doing
Yeah.
that and they're
Yeah.
kind of doing it, I'm sure as they're answering and you can kind of see a pattern, that's really cool. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
love that. Amy, so where can people find you, whether it's online, or how can they contact you? And when they're online, when they get to your website, what is it that you want them to do and how can they find you?
Yeah. Well, I want them to contact me. I love talking to people. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about arts-based learning, leadership, coaching, all of that. So always open to having conversations. They can find me on amyswotinsky.com. So that's my website, or through LinkedIn. Very easy.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. And I will put I will put those links in the description. I'm not going to put the description in the links. I'm going to put the links in the description. That's really
Good
cool.
idea.
Yeah, Amy, I really enjoyed hearing that story and just really kind of hearing what you're doing because that's such a unique take on leadership, right? Like let's just
Yeah.
be honest.
Thanks.
I always tell people, there's 8 billion people in the world, 7.5 billion of them are marketers. Congratulations, you've met another one, right? And that's sometimes how I'm sure it can feel as being a coach, but I'm not sure how many coaches I've heard that have taken that art and that creativity aspect of it. And I think that really sets that apart. And I think that's a really cool aspect to what you're doing on a team level and also on an individual level. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we finish this up?
I guess the only thing is that AI has really changed the game. So
Oh yeah.
leaders from before are not the same as the leadership skills you need now. So I think it's a good time to start thinking about the skills you need that AI can't do.
Yeah. And speaking of that, how has AI kind of changed with like what you're doing in your segment? Like how has AI, if at all, changed what you're
Yeah.
doing or how you thought about it?
Yeah. Well, I think it's exactly like what I was getting at, which is AI, can do so many things,
Yeah.
data analysis, right? It can write great content. It can do all of the stuff, but what can it do? Right? It doesn't have empathy,
Mm,
right? It can't really innovate for something that's never been done before, right? And it can't build trust between your team members. So
mhm.
leaders are, obviously still really important, but it's a different skill set.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's wonderful. I was just thinking about that as you were saying that. I was like, yeah, you
Yeah.
can't really take AI through I mean, you can maybe take them through the assessment, but you can't take them through like the creativity aspect of it necessarily. So yeah, having AI do that kind of that soft or not soft skill, but that like, okay, well, we're going to have it do this, but having it, I always like to say it can tell a story, but it can't tell your story in the way that you tell it. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's fantastic.
Exactly.
Well, Amy, thank you so much. not for coming out because you're in your own office, but thanks so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And I hope that everybody enjoyed it. And I think that they will, because that is a really cool and unique thing that you're doing.
Well, thank you so much, Roger. It was awesome to see you again.